Hello. Very happy that you joined us here on Stop Talk for a faculty reading. Last week, Genevieve Sly Crane joined us for a reading and she is the author of Sorority. She read from New Work. And that evening, Genevieve won a Whiting Award, an incredibly prestigious award given to 10 writers across the country every year. Now, we weren't allowed to tell you about it that evening, but now we get to brag about Genevieve, who is a graduate of the MFA program and who is now on faculty. So that was very exciting. And the speech that was given that evening was given by Sarah Rule, who is a playwright, also a Whiting winner from several years ago, and a MacArthur Genius Grant recipient. I'm going to use a couple of lines from her speech in regards to Genevieve and the other winners for this year. John Donne once said that love makes one little room and everywhere. And her comment was, the screen is now making an everywhere for us. The Whiting was a celebration of the poetry of the playwright, the imagination of the nonfiction writer, and the drama of the fiction writer. And those are the genres we're going to be celebrating today. And now I'm going to introduce our first reader, Patricia McCormick. Please welcome Patricia.
Thank you. I also want to thank Luann and Frank for arranging this event for us to keep us connected and to keep us in touch with our identities as writers. I'm going to read something utterly new and utterly scary and something I haven't shared with anybody before. It's an essay, and it's called Domestic Terrorism. Every year, a full week before Mother's Day, my mother would send me a dearest daughter card, a none too subtle hint that she expected something equally affectionate in reply. She put a lot of stock into those Hallmark sentiments, underlining certain passages in the cards that she sent me and poring over the words in the ones I sent her, looking for deeper meaning. Once, when we were going through a rough period, and we went through a lot of very rough periods, she reminded me that I'd once sent her a Mother's Day card that said, "I love you." The day she brought up this card, we were at brunch. I'd just graduated from college and had invited her to meet me at a fancy restaurant, my treat. I told her I wanted to have a closer relationship with her, but first I said, "We need to have a talk." "About what?" she said. "About the times, you know, when you hit me." I said this so gingerly, I could scarcely believe I'd said it. "That never happened," she said. "You used to hit me with the wooden spoon," I said. "You threw shoes at me." She sighed. "Can't we just have a nice time?" I pushed my expensive eggs around on the plate. "Don't forget, Missy," my mother said. "You sent me a Mother's Day card that says, 'I love you.'" I hadn't forgotten. "I still have the card," she said, "and it says, 'I love you.'" I didn't understand what she was getting at. "You can't have it both ways, you know." She took a sip of her coffee, then dabbed her mouth with her napkin. "So, which is it?" This woman had beaten me so badly that more than once I'd hidden in the garage all day rather than go to school. She'd thrown shoes at me, books, a sopping wet sponge. Once I was nearly knocked out when a jar of peanut butter came sailing through the kitchen and hit me on the head. And now, wielding nothing more than a salad fork, she'd managed to land a devastating blow right in my most tender place. The foolish, ever hopeful part of me that still needed her to love me. "I love you," I said. My first memories of my mother are tender. When I was maybe 3 or 4, we'd sit together, paging through a mail order catalog of mother-daughter dresses. Sometimes she'd put a kiss in the inside of my palm and wrap my fingers around it so I could save it for later. Other days she'd say she needed her privacy and show me to the door. I'd step outside and she'd slide the deadbolt into place with a thunk. By 4, I'd spent many afternoons wandering our suburban neighborhood alone. Sometimes an older woman across the street let me come inside and pet her schnauzer while she played the piano. Once, a man in a Cadillac pulled up and asked me to go for a ride with him. I said no, thank you. Mostly I hid in the woods in a vacant lot and made up stories in my head. One afternoon when I was about 6, I came home in my Catholic school uniform, only to find my mother in the kitchen, a wild look in her eyes. "Where do you think you've been?" she said. I shrugged. She grabbed the handle to the junk drawer. Inside were coupons, potholders, rubber bands, and the wooden spoon. She hoisted the spoon into the air and told me to roll down my knee socks and turn around. I did. She smacked my thighs, my calves, every inch of the backs of my legs. When she was finished, my legs were stinging with bright pink welts. She sent me upstairs to my room. "I suggest you think long and hard about the kind of person you want to be," she said. This thing with the wooden spoon took on the quality of a ritual, predictable and yet mysterious. Eventually, I came to fear the rattle of the junk drawer every time she pulled it open. Even if she was just looking for a rubber band, I flinched. Sometimes she was reaching for the wooden spoon to stir the spaghetti sauce, and she'd turn around to see me standing in the middle of the kitchen, my socks around my ankles. Meanwhile, she behaved, as far as the rest of the world could see, and actually as far as I could see, like a normal person. She dressed me in clean clothes for Sunday Mass. She and my dad had the whole neighborhood over for an annual backyard party. And she tried out new casserole recipes from Ladies' Home Journal. She bought a special bundt cake for my 10th birthday. It had a doll in the center, and the slices of the cake formed its petticoat. She walked through a snowstorm to come to my 7th grade flute recital. She bought me go-go boots when I pestered for them. She taught me the value of good manners, good grammar, a good book, and a good sense of humor. Much of the time, she was a good mother. But sometimes, without warning, the air around her hummed, as if stray lightning had just touched down. What happened next was often as terrifying as what didn't. She'd put her hands around my neck, not choking me, but holding her fingers rigid as if she were trying to decide whether she should. Once she cornered me, raised a frying pan over my head, then swung it, stopping just short of my brow. Years later, by the time I'd married and had my own kids, I indeed thought long and hard about the kind of person I wanted to be. I wanted to be the kind that wouldn't hit a child. And I never did. I never even had the impulse to hurt them. Although, and I'm not proud to admit this, I did give them the finger behind their backs quite a bit. But I had no idea how to deal with the normal anger all parents feel at times. I didn't raise my hand to my children, but I realize now that I often gave off a silent rage that filled the house like a bad smell. And I was often felled by a depression so enervating that I couldn't function. With the help of a good therapist, I learned that my depression was my own anger over my childhood, over the everyday irritations of being a parent, anger I was turning in on myself. I also learned that I was terrified of that anger, terrified I'd become my mother. I never addressed the issue of my mother's violence again after that expensive brunch. Bringing it up and having her deny it again would just be a repeat of the times in the kitchen when I stood with my socks around my ankles, feeling like I was the crazy one. More than that, I came to understand that any kind of honest reckoning with my mother was impossible. I realized it would destroy something, an image of herself she couldn't afford to question, and to try to get her to admit what she had done. Eventually, I decided that the sanest thing I could do for myself and the most loving thing I could do for her was to let go. It also occurred to me during those battles in the kitchen, she wasn't just wrestling with me. She was wrestling with the urge to hurt me. She stopped short of breaking bones, of actually hitting me with the frying pan, although it seemed clear she wanted to. And maybe, a friend suggested, that when my mother locked me out, she was trying to protect me from herself. Maybe she was afraid of what she would do if we were alone together in the house all day, and so she put me out of harm's way. It came as a relief to consider this possibility, unlikely or not, because otherwise I was left wondering what it was that was so awful about me that she had to put a deadbolt between us. Maybe she understood that it was something awful about her. There are many things I will never know or understand about my mother. I don't think she was mentally ill, nor was she an alcoholic. In some ways, it might be easier if her behavior coalesced into something with a diagnosis. But I got a small insight into her state of mind when, after her death, I found taped to the inside of a cabinet right above the junk drawer a cheesy poem, yellowed with age, from one of the magazines she loved. Oh, give me patience when wee hands tug at me with their small demands, and give me gentle and smiling eyes to keep my lips from hasty replies. And let not weariness, confusion, or noise obscure my vision from life's fleeting joys. So when in years to come my house is still, no bitter memories its rooms may fill. It's tempting to see this as ironic or as just more proof of my mother's denial. Or I could think of it as a prayer for her younger self, one she tried but failed to heed. Thank you.
Patty, that was extraordinary. Just extraordinary. You're so kind to let us hear that. Such powerful writing. Thank you, Patty. Thank you. I'm going to return to the Sarah Rule speech for a minute. She said that she had learned that when the plague shut down the theaters in London in the 1590s, Shakespeare turned to poetry. From his Venus and Adonis, he wrote, while the playhouses were closed and writers were quarantined, came a very strange compliment. The plague is banished by thy breath. Books, unlike theater, unlike poetry readings, carry no germs. In books are ideas that can spread, but without contagion. The libraries may be closed, but the books are all open. But we get to have poetry readings without contagion. And now Tyler Allen Penny is going to read poetry. He's a graduate of the MFA program and teaches undergrads in the Creative Writing and Literature program on Stony Brook main campus. Thank you so much, Tyler.
This first poem is called Through the Window Slips the Light of a Lung-Colored Moon. On the sink of a stranger's bulb-lit bath, we claimed each other's name. Two bona fide princes of the party. I was crowned with a jester's tines of bells, fleur-de-lis, black crosses. You were haloed by wreath weaved thick with rose gold silk lilies, bramble, and oak leaves. Did you know you kissed not a prince, but a beast hung with lust, a metronomic man of seasonal embrace and decay? The frail husk of a horseshoe crab splayed open in the sand, a storm-shored ghost freighter yearning for its captain. You breezed back to your friends gossiping in the corner and left deep within the crawl space of me, whom you called the last true Renaissance man, a masquerade of stability. The newest name added to a crowd of past mouths. Though you left something more, a low-throated, primal sound of an animal in hunt, a hunger rumbling endlessly in the night. Alone in the mirror, my bit raw lips pursed purple through gloss, those soft bruises of abandon. If I were to pass again from this tiled hell, where at all the right angles our bodies paralleled, I would not have your name, nor my sporty crown. Instead, a Pavlovian thirst would remain, and my wrist would be chained to the porcelain. This next poem is called My Throat Slips Off the Pillow When I Say We Need. To stop these so-called performances of empty mannequins, two-body engines purr, bad blood burning, then lay idle underneath blankets in the after quiet. We end when the stiffening of morning begins. Voiceless, in hushed eye conversations, questions of tomorrow cloud within my mouth. In a breathy roar, a talk later roll over, a slight twitch, you press against my lips. Outside the window, the answers fly south for winter, eyes closed to the sun. This next poem is called A Storm Approaching with Fear Disguised as Confession. A bruised sky, swollen low with lightning, on the west side of a tinfoil lake. I stand far away from the parking lot on a crumbling cliff above a 50-foot dead drop. Each brittle black bush is calling Moses. Each half-submerged rock was a sacred son. The clouds, they mumble something for 6 Mississippi seconds, then flare again. Parted like a child's hair on Sunday, the sky for miles to the east, nothing but velvet Jesus blue. I feel you on the edge beside me. A rattlesnake, a white noise smoldering in the brush. I saw you leave. I could have sworn I heard a door slam. I thought maybe you had been taken from me. And I'll read one more. Interiority complex, or daydreams of possible aftermaths. I was thinking these thoughts and dreaming those dreams and self-soothing with morning menthols, aimlessly afloat in the room's fog, left over from last night's fuck about the room. Set a mouthy pair of legs, flicking her cig short of the trash. She, divined by her mother's ghost, would name each star living the sun, then lay claim to how they've come to light. All soul, no faith, a strong woman in song. A cowboy's deep-cut shirt beams a full-chest star, a violent galaxy swarming underneath his winter coat. One thing, he says, then another. Like them angels' collared bells chiming themselves stupid in Brooklyn, trying to save up for a backup pair of wings at yet another's 90s night headbang, just in case they and a fresh face feel frisky later on and lunge off the balcony ledge. Flight patterns and footsteps all erratic. Heads lolling weightless in the Sharpie-scraped bathroom, they spit out mouthfuls of family failure until each other's light shuttles into their noses, them hands numbly slapping the concrete wall. Oh, how the body dampens, crashes, then retracts. They speak to me not with the conviction of fireflies, their souls signaling to be seen, not with the soft curve of a pearl, nor with the signing of an epistolary friend. Nothing of this would justify an existence so beautiful, so craved. And yet, as that once they both predicted, I've forgotten how their voices could swell like a church's choir, their singular tone rising to prayer like stalactites. A monitored heart's continuous falsetto, my own achingly pumping to reach that familiar altitude. And yet I've merely made true their prophecy of empty chairs at the table. That's it.
Bravo, Tyler. I love interiority complex. That's great. Thank you. Now we were going to listen to Susan Minot, and alas, the internet is just not cooperating. So rather than frustrate you by having her come on for a few tantalizing seconds and then moving, not being able to see her and then bringing her back, we're going to have Susan join us another time. So now we're going to go to Julie Sheehan, also a Whiting Award winner and director of the BFA program at Stony Brook, and just an incredible poet. Lucky us. Julie.
Hi, everyone. I know Lily Vaughn is out there, another Mississippian, to join Tyler. That was awesome, that Mississippi poem and those crazy titles that you're doing. It's so great to hear you read and great to hear Patty read. And just like I'm sure all of you out there coming to this live chat, it's just really great to see each other's faces and reconnect. It's been quite a crazy time. I'm going to read just two poems, and maybe if I feel as brave as Patty McCormick, I'll read a tiny bit of prose. I'm working on this chapbook project that's called Dear Hobby Lobby. And Hobby Lobby, as we know, is the gigantic big box chain of stores that sell like bags of colored feathers and sequins and little styrofoam balls and stuff like that. And our Supreme Court decided for us that Hobby Lobby actually has a religious conscience, just like you and me. It has a soul and gets to make moral choices and has a protected freedom of religion right now. Hobby Lobby. So there's this famous case, Hobby Lobby, which to me is just incredibly disturbing and upsetting. And I'm not sure why. So I'm working on this chapbook that has a series of letters from a curious shopper who's Christian and is drawn to Hobby Lobby because it has a Christian mission. And the more research she does, the more distressed she gets. which is kind of like what happened to me when I started researching Hobby Lobby. And intermixed with these are poems that are from the point of view of a visitor to China, which is kind of undergoing its own transformation and its own set of questions about what it wants to be as a country state. So I'll read two of the China poems. One is called French Concession, which is one of the neighborhoods in Shanghai. French Concession, Shanghai, 5:16 a.m. Gray on pearl, on pewter, on smoky gray, distinguishes itself as best it can, a brightening fog that struggles to assert time. Even the stoplight blinks back tears, its red smudged as with an oppressive thumb. Whether tinged with grit or drizzle, who can say? It's the dawn of the sunset of the era of bad feeling. Here in a city, awakening to the gentrified husk of the Jing'an Temple, a plastics factory now reincarnated into its old song being. Nostalgia built it once, and then again, as enlightened ones fled some rough new force from the north in those hazy years before a dynasty can make out its end in scenario rear view mirrors. And the silent motorbikes, gray or smudgy red, always just around the bend, encroach upon us before we can withdraw, as colonial powers must, to the damp curb. Light rain, fair conditions, enough light to make out the hacked limbs of sycamores. Or are they London plains, those mongrel species? Either way, of expats left by French invaders, conspired this morning without our remonstrance. Our new tennis shoes on sale, Chinese made, will gray soon enough, as has our hair, which once cast nimbi around our vaporous heads. Okay, so that's the first China poem. The second one's called The Humble Administrator's Garden. And there's all these incredible examples of classical Chinese gardens, which have concepts of little garden rooms, right? And the translations of these are truly remarkable. So even the name of the garden, the Humble Administrator's Garden, that's an actual place in Suzhou, China. But the rooms inside it are called these incredible things like the Hall of Distant Fragrances, and a room called Watching the Pines and Appreciating Paintings. And there's another nearby garden called the Master of the Nets. So these names are translated, but they suggest a kind of spectacular sense around experience, depending on which place inside the garden you're currently occupying. All right, so this one's called The Humble Administrator's Garden, circa 1509, Suzhou, China. Of course, it cost a fortune. The Hall of Distant Fragrances could waft those lotus blossoms only after cheap labor dug the lake and lugged the ton of water and cultivated inch by inch even the stones. For rocks are no mere rocks, but scholar rocks, curated and posed. Let us wait. In the Watching the Pines and Appreciating Paintings Hall, need I say more? At the Master of Nets, until grunts complete the effortlessness we anticipate. Leaning on the jade in spring ought to dispel any humility administering such beauty left its patron, whose view borrows a pagoda. Perhaps our host moved mountains, or rather, his workmen did. Oh, look, a rustic hut some fisherman never used, his boat built of stone. He's out all night in search of koi, an ornamental fish that can't be stomached. And I'll read one of these letters, Dear Hobby Lobby letters. Okay, here goes. Dear Hobby Lobby, you are beset by sinners. I noticed one of your workers, not to rat her out, but Sioux City store, $12.80 an hour, first initial D, used Plan B. Although you wisely refused to pay for it, I worry for your soul. Fire her, lest your freedom be stifled. And also, to save your soul, please fire your accounting firm, birth control users, divorced people, Jews, your various law firms, ditto, your vendors as per above, and LOL, your customers. Turns out Americans use birth control quite a bit. 11 million are on the pill right now, just like D should have been if she'd had a plan A. You'd be much happier serving the people of Andorra, Malta, San Marino, Angola, Congo Brazzaville, Congo Kinshasa, Egypt, Gabon, Guinea-Bissau, Madagascar, Mauritania, Sao Tome and Principe, Senegal, Iraq, Laos, Marshall Islands, Micronesia, Palau, Philippines, Tonga, Dominican Republic, El Salvador, Haiti, Honduras, Nicaragua, and Suriname. None of them allow abortion in any circumstances. P.S. Don't forget to source your products from these countries pronto. Thanks.
Oh, Julie, so wonderful. And what's so exciting, the comments that are coming up are just extraordinary. So to go to the comments, and y'all, if you have questions, please shoot them on over. In fact, virtually everybody is saying that Patty, Tyler, and Julie are on fire with this reading over and over again. Susie Merrill says, so beautiful and gorgeous, generous, Patty. So that was so beautiful, Patty. Miranda Beeson, wow, so glad to be here. Sally Martell, thank you for sharing, Patty. And Ursula, Patty, this is gorgeous and moving and terrifying. Thank you. And Bob Reeves says, brava. And Miranda Beeson says, yay. I'm speechless about these three readings. Tyler, Lily Wan says, man, I've missed Tyler's poems. And Hannah Parker sent some really cute emojis that I can't translate, but I'll figure them out. Miranda Beeson, wow, wow, wow. Susan Merrill, gorgeous Tyler Allen. Magdalene, Patty, this was so great. Paul Harding, Tyler with the truth and beauty, loved it, sir. Miranda, clapping wildly. Robert Reeves, wild applause. Amy Hempel, all so strong. Miranda again,
okay,
oh, that
take this anymore.
Well, you gotta, because I haven't gotten you yet.
I'm getting embarrassed.
Well, okay, not too much longer. So, but Max Parker, ornamental fish can't be stomached. She loved that line. So here's a question. Thank you for making my Wednesday. Reminds me of why I love taking classes in the CWL department at Stony Brook. And Tyler, awesome poems. Ursula. So one thing that you wasn't revealed to you, Tyler, do you want to tell people what happened to you physically recently?
Sure, yeah. So I unfortunately came down with COVID, and I am now on the mend, luckily. But you guys have not been hearing me cough off the microphone. There's still a lingering cough, but it's been a heck of a tour, a heck of a journey. But they are not kidding when they say it is a killer disease. It was pretty rough going to it, and I'm pretty thankful for my caretakers and my friends kind of coming through and checking in with me every day. So I just kind of sat back and read and slept a lot. A lot of shots of Mucinex.
Thank you, Tyler. And we're so grateful that you're going to be okay. A couple of questions that have come in. Patty, Amy Handelson is asking, what are some tools you recommend to be able to get to the point in memoir of usurping our rose-colored images of sometimes abusive parents?
I think the opposite may have been true for me in terms of writing this piece, that I still harbored so much anger and hurt about my parents' behavior toward me, that it took me a really long time to see their humanity, see their struggles, see the shame that they experienced. I think one of the dirty little secrets of an abusive home is that everybody feels shame, including the abusers. They aren't in touch with it, I think, and act it out even after swearing they'll never do what they did last time. I think they compartmentalize and think, oh, that couldn't have been me. I would never do such a thing. They turn the recipients of that violence, they turn us into the crazy people. And so I had to fight off a lot of that, to find my own voice and my own truth about what happened. And then that's just not good enough. Just to say, okay, I'm going to document that these terrible things happened. I need to take it further than that and try. I don't think I succeeded fully, but try to use my imagination, which I guess is a fiction writer's tool, to look inside that woman who was my mother, look at the clues that she left behind, and try to imagine a compassionate take on her behavior.
Thank you, Patty. Another question we have, Julie, how did you come to write this prose letter? What would you do as a poet? What would you do with it in terms of publishing, disseminating it? What would you do?
You know, I'm not sure. I've never done a chapbook before. And what intrigues me about that is that it's a very tight form. You really can't, you cannot go on and on. And if anyone's read my work, you know that I can go on and on for some time. So this idea of being forced to bookend myself, that's what intrigues me about the chapbook, that it's going to make me make cuts. So how will these letters and these sort of China poems play off each other? I'm not totally sure. I already have way too much material in terms of letters. So they're going to need to be cut down. But there's a little narrative through arc for that speaker. I don't know. It's a work in progress, so we'll see. It better progress. That's all I could say.
So just a couple more questions. And many people have been writing about you, Tyler, and how pleased they are that you're on the mend, and what a trooper you are.
Thanks,
so
everyone.
Tyler, in terms of your writing, have the events of the last few weeks given you more material?
Well, simultaneously happening all through this, my father has been also in the ICU and out of the ICU. So these past 2 weeks, I've been thinking a lot in terms of my own mortality and what that means in terms of a young body incorporating this ability for death versus an older body also having that same ability, and what it could possibly mean for my father to be in the ICU for not just his first time, his second time for a long stint. And then versus me kind of being similarly like him, prone in a bed for 24 hours a day. It's been a lot of exploring my own beliefs of mortality, a lot of death, of what do I appreciate, what do I what am I lingering towards when I think about what makes me happy, what like just general experiences of possible death. I have this idea in my head is that everybody gets like 3 strikes. Obviously, whenever it comes to like near-death experiences, I myself have had 2. I'm probably not counting this one a third because I feel like my immunity was strong enough to get me through this. But I have had 2 other experiences with life or death experiences, and it's those poems. I have written poems about them, obviously, and I'm probably going to continue writing poems about this whole experience. It's definitely given me a lot to think about, and it's definitely given me a lot of fodder to reconsider my values, and it's in relationship with my father and my own ideas. I mean, as a poet, we take every little moment, every tiny minuscule of beauty, and refocus that into something. I was telling a friend earlier today that whenever I sit down to write a poem, I don't normally consider I'm going to write a poem about this, or I'm going to write a poem about so-and-so or for so-and-so or anything like that. I'm writing my own life, and I'm trying to make it beautiful for my own sake, and for its own sake, because life in itself is beautiful. Death in itself is some form of beauty as well. But me as a poet, I know I can take that to the next level and make that even more beautiful than just its own existence. I can retranslate it, as all good art does, into something even more accessible for myself, more accessible for others to understand. This is what life is, for me at least, and this is possibly, during all this, what death could have been, and what death could be. So.
Thank you, Tyler. And last question for Patty. How was it to read this piece that you'd never shared before?
It was scary, but I set a challenge for myself. This is an incredible opportunity to read in an intimate and supportive, but disembodied kind of way. And I have to say, hearing myself read it made everything feel more true. Do you know how sometimes you read something and you're like, maybe it wasn't quite right? It wasn't that way. But putting it in words and then sharing it with listeners made it real, every aspect of it, both the ugliness and the possible beauty of it.
Thank you. Thank you all. And thank you to Frank for masterminding everything. We're going to be organizing more readings. Yes. And Susan, we'll try to get Susan's feed to work. And I'm just wanting, on Monday, April 6th, we're going to have another faculty reading. We have some really great people lined up already, including Matt Clam. And I'm going to go back to quote Sarah Rule one last time. The injunction to write becomes more crucial now than ever. It might save our culture from mendacity. It might banish boredom and existential dread. It might save our human spirit from isolation, because existential dread occasionally inhibits the impulse to write. I am keeping an ongoing list of reasons to keep writing. And so please note reasons to keep writing. These are exemplars. Thank you so much, and we'll see you next week. Bye-bye.
Thanks, guys. Bye.
Bye.
Thank